hello to all you aspiring surveyors out there. Studying hard at Scarpa Mattei, I bet.
I bet.
It's got to be pretty cool, though, living surrounded by all that history in northern Italy. You've got those classic traditional houses all around you in your town, and then Venice isn't too far off with its just amazing historical architecture.
Oh, absolutely.
But I'm guessing you've also noticed, probably in the past few years or so, some newer, more modern-looking buildings popping up.
Yeah, they kind of stick out, don't they?
Well, that's what we're going to deep dive into today. Modern architecture. And I know it might seem a little, well, irrelevant when you're surrounded by so much older architecture and studying to be surveyors who are often dealing with historical buildings.
Right.
But trust me, understanding this stuff, it's surprisingly important. We've got some really interesting material here that defines modern architecture, explains where it came from, and highlights its main characteristics.
Perfect.
So ready to jump in?
Yeah, let's do it.
First things first, what exactly is modern architecture?
Okay, well, to put it simply, modern architecture is a style of building design that emerged in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. You can kind of think of it as a reaction against those more elaborate decorative styles you see a lot of, like Gothic or Renaissance or Baroque.
Oh, right, those very ornate, detailed styles.
Exactly. Like, think about all those amazing buildings you see in Venice with all the intricate details and decorations. Modern architecture was a complete shift, a move towards something fresh, something different.
Yeah, makes sense. So it's a pretty significant change then. What was going on at the time that led to such a big shift in how buildings were designed?
Well, a lot was happening, actually. It was a time of huge changes, both technologically and socially. Like, the Industrial Revolution was in full swing, and that brought with it new materials like steel and glass, which, suddenly architects had to work with.
Oh, right. Totally new possibilities.
Yeah, and new construction techniques, too. Like, think of using standardized parts to make buildings faster and, well, more efficiently. And then, after World War II, there was a massive need to rebuild cities, to provide housing for all these people moving into cities. So there was a real push for practical buildings that could adapt to the changing needs of how people lived and worked in these growing, bustling cities.
So basically, new needs and new tools really shaped how buildings were designed.
Yeah.
Fascinating how these historical events had such a lasting impact. Now, there's this phrase you always hear when you're talking about modern architecture: form follows function. What does that actually mean in practical terms?
Oh, that's a really key principle in modern architecture, and it's often credited to this American architect, Louis Sullivan from the Chicago School. Basically, it means that the design of a building, like how it looks, should be primarily based on what it's going to be used for, on its function.
Right, so it's about being practical.
Exactly. So if you're designing a school, for example, the layout, the features, everything it should support learning, not just look impressive from the outside.
Oh, I see. So it's not just about aesthetics, it's about how the building actually works for the people using it.
Precisely.
So if a building is intended as a factory, for instance, its design would prioritize efficiency and utility over fancy decorations, right?
Exactly.
What are some of the things, the visual cues we'd see in a modern building that show this idea of form follows function in practice?
Well, one of the first things you'd probably notice is the simplicity of the design. Modern buildings often have clean, simple lines, basic shapes, with a real focus on the essential structure rather than added ornamentation.
Right, no extra frills.
Exactly. And you'll often see those new materials we talked about, steel and glass, used in very straightforward, functional ways.
Makes sense.
And because function is so important in modern architecture, you'll often find open spaces inside and lots of natural light coming in through big windows.
Oh yeah, I can definitely see that in some of the more modern buildings I've been in.
Right. And architects, they were really experimenting with how to arrange buildings and rooms in new and innovative ways to make them more useful, to make them more efficient. And the overall feeling you get from a modern building is often one of, simplicity, practicality, and the sense of looking towards the future.
Okay, that's really helpful. Now, for our listeners in Scarpa Mattei, I want to bring this back to you all. Living amongst those traditional buildings and being so close to the historical wonders of Venice, these modern buildings that you might see popping up in your town, they can seem pretty out of place, pretty different from what you're used to seeing.
Oh, for sure.
So how does understanding these ideas about modern architecture, its history and its characteristics, how does that help you all, especially as future surveyors?
Well, even though you might be surrounded by older architecture, these newer buildings, they're kind of like a window into how architectural design has evolved over time. It's like a snapshot of how things have changed.
Right, it shows that architecture is not static, it keeps developing.
Exactly. And when you see those new buildings in your town, try to look for those key elements we talked about. Can you spot the simple shapes, the use of glass and steel, the emphasis on open spaces?
Yeah, good point. It's like a scavenger hunt for modern architecture.
Right. You'll start to see how these core ideas of modern architecture, they're present even in your town, even amidst all the traditional and historical buildings. And remember, this style, it keeps changing and evolving as technology advances and as society's needs change.
So what you're saying is that understanding the basic principles of modern architecture gives us a foundation, a way to understand what we're seeing in contemporary building design.
Exactly.
It helps us make sense of it all.
Exactly.
So for all of you future surveyors out there, think about this. Understanding this concept of form follows function and being able to identify the main features of modern architecture, it gives you a really valuable tool to look at all kinds of buildings, whether they're old or new.
I couldn't agree more.
It's not just about memorizing facts for an exam. It's about understanding why buildings are the way they are and how those designs continue to develop and change over time.
It gives you a deeper appreciation for the whole story of architecture and how it connects to the world around us.
Absolutely. So as you go about your day, maybe on your way to Scarpa Mate or just walking around your town, take a look at those newer buildings again. And this time, think about how this idea of form follows function might explain their design. How does understanding these principles change how you see those buildings, especially alongside the traditional houses you're so familiar with and those incredible historical masterpieces in nearby Venice? And what questions does all of this raise for you as you prepare to become surveyors, the people who will be shaping the landscapes of the future? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thank you.